Good morning, afternoon, actually, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. Our speaker today doesn't really need an introduction, but let's go. Our speaker today is Professor Miles Padgett. He's a Royal Society Research Professor and holds the Kelvin Chair of Natural Philosophy at the University of Glasgow. He has a very large research interest and usually cover all things optical, from the basic ways in which light behaves as it pushes and twists the world around us to the application of new optical techniques in imaging and sensing. So he's a fellow of the Royal Society, and he has won national and international prizes, including in 2017 the Max Born Award of Optica, 2019 Rumford Medal of the Royal Society, and 2021 the Quantum Electronics and Optics Prize of the European Physical Society. So at this point, I will leave the camera to him and the microphone to him, and if the audience has any question, please feel free to write down in the chat or in the questions and answer section, or feel free to raise your hand and we will allow the microphone for you to talk. So thank you very much, Miles. This is just for you.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for organising this, and thanks to all of you for coming and joining me. And I hope this is going to be useful to your careers. Now, as Aurora said, I've sort of vaguely got my chat box open to me. So if people have questions while I'm speaking, it might be helpful if they would just type them in there, and I'll try and answer them in the flow. I've got 15 slides or something. So just to give you some idea as to how we're going through, we've set aside an hour and a half. We don't need to take an hour and a half, but I'm certainly not going to speak for an hour and a half. So I'm generally happy to do a generic Q&A at the end, if you haven't typed anything in the box. If there's something that you would like to ask me that you felt you didn't want to share, or that comes to you afterwards, then you should just email me and I will try it and answer in a prompt way. So Aurora read out my webpage or whatever on me, or maybe it was my LinkedIn profile. I don't know, or one of the two. I've got a slide. Hopefully, I've got a slide about a little bit about my career, and I put this up in the way of context, really. So I obviously think I'm quite good, but I know all too well that I've also been very lucky, and let's not underestimate the roles that luck plays in a career. And I know that I have had many privileges, from the mentors that I've had to the selection committees that I've encountered or whatever, and through that I've been lucky enough to hold various fellowships. Some of those are the fellowships that you are perhaps currently thinking of. So, for example, I was when I was 29 or something, I had a fellowship from the Royal Society of Edinburgh, and I was lucky enough to go from that to a university research fellowship from the Royal Society, and I've had other ones since. I just want to say, for the avoidance of doubt, I've had a lot more rejections for fellowships and grants and almost everything you can mention, papers, than I've had acceptances. So don't feel that I don't share at least some of the experiences that you have had. And now I'm old. I'm 63, I think. And because of that, in my career stage, I have served on a number of the fellowship panels that you may be subjected to. So, for example, I did 7 years on the Leverhulme Trust Early Career Fellowship panel, which was amazing. Really enjoyed that. I have chaired the Royal Society University Research Fellowship Scheme. I did that for 3 years. And indeed, I was interim exec chair of EPSRC. So clearly have some familiarity with their fellowship program. And I was doing a little head count this morning. I think of order 10 or so PDRAs from my own research group have also gone on to win fellowships of the kind of thing that I'm talking about this morning. So what am I really talking about today in terms of the fellowships I had in mind? So certainly, if I sort of ordered them in the number of years of postdocness that is typical prior to their award, I guess the fellowships which are probably targeted at the earliest career people are probably things like the Leverhulme Trust. Those are 3-year fellowships. It is demand controlled in terms of that most universities will run some kind of filtering system to decide who they are going to allow to apply. That in the case of the Leverhulme Trust, of course, is in part because the Leverhulme Trust only pay 50% of the salary and the university has to pay the other 50%. Then there are fellowships like the Royal Academy of Engineering. They have just changed completely their application process. It's now gone into a sort of expression of interest type operation. Then, like moving again on to, like, I'm going to say older, whatever, less early career people, probably the university research fellowships, where I would say it's typical that people are generally successful for those during their second or third postdoc, to give some idea. But what I'm hoping to do now is sort of talk about some sort of general principles. So we better start off with the bad news. I was just talking to Lucy earlier about how upsetting it can be. When I did the URF scheme, which I did for 3 years until last year, actually, we would typically get somewhere in the region of 250 applications a year. And the numbers were such that ultimately we were going to fund about 5% of those applications. And that is pretty brutal as a process. I'll just say a few words about that process, just to give you an idea. Clearly, different fellowship schemes run differently. But we had a selection panel of about 12 people. And every single one of those 250 applications would be read by 3 of us. We would score those applications out of 7. Totally bizarre. Why 7, not 10 or 5? I have no idea. But we would score them out of 7. And based on those scores and discussion, we would whittle that down from about 250 applications to about 70 or 80 applications. And those 70 or 80 applications would then be sent out for expert peer review. And those experts would write back to us with their thoughts and a score, but the thoughts were more important than the score. And based on those thoughts, we would invite 28, 27 people to interview. And based on those interviews, we would award 13, just to give you some idea. Different awarding bodies work differently, but I just want, most of them are some kind of multi-stage process. Most of them will have a selection process, which is in part based on expert peer review. I'll come to that later. But also the views of people like me. Why do I say that? Well, I'm an optical physicist. I understand a fair amount about some bits of optics, but nevertheless, I would be looking at fellowship proposals on chiral materials or gravitational waves or all kinds of different things. And I should say that was particularly true in the Leverhulme Trust, where I was also the reviewer for geosciences. So invariably, these fellowship committees, people will be making decisions quite some distance outside of their own personal research expertise. So back to the 250 applications, I would say those 250 applications are superficially all very good, written by extremely good people, with where the scheme allows very supportive referees. As I've already mentioned, few of the applications I fully understand, and few do I grasp the true state of the art. And all of those, community, can't spell community, all of those I would be asking myself, what is the evidence that this application, that the community to which this person belongs, the people that do understand, think that this person, this project is in the top 5% of your generation, and the 5% matches that ultimate success fund. So it's not, is this person above average? The question I'm asking myself is there, what's the evidence contained in this application that this idea, this person is top 5%? And if you take nothing else away from today, think about what it is that's on your CV, what it is that's in your project idea, maybe, but what it is on your CV in particular that would mark you out as someone who is this special. Now, before I go on to this next slide, I just want to say that unashamedly today, I'm talking about research fellowship applications. That doesn't mean I don't think that there are brilliant careers elsewhere in the system, whether it be a spin-out startup company, whether you go and become a patent attorney, a journal editor. There are fascinating careers out there, which are intellectually stimulating, intellectually demanding, very difficult. And nothing I say today is meant to undermine any aspect of those. I'm not presenting a research fellowship as the pinnacle of human endeavor. I'm just saying, if that is what you are interested in, that's what I'm talking about today. So we had an interesting, while we were waiting for people to join, we had an interesting reflection on, is it, when you apply for a grant or a fellowship or anything, what are people judging? Are they judging you, or are they judging the project? And clearly it's never all one thing or the other. Let's take one extreme. If I sit, as I have done, on the medal award committees, where we're going to give the Young Medal to someone in the IOP, or we're going to give the Rumford Medal to someone in the Royal Society, those medal nominations are normally made about the person and the work that they have done. There is no element of future project plan. It's about the person. It's a retrospective look. At the other extreme, there are schemes that exist where the peer review is blinded, where the identity of the applicant is removed or it's never entered into the project, and all people see as the project. So clearly there's both extremes, and most other things are somewhere in the middle. If you take EPSRC responsive mode, where lecturer X applies for a 3-year grant to study Y, that is mainly about the project. Is the project a good idea? And in terms of the person, I am simply looking at that person to ask myself, do they have the skills and track record that makes me think that they are capable of delivering that project? But I'd say it's heavily weighted towards the project. When it comes to something like a fellowship application, it is much more of a mix between, this is a really exciting idea for a project. It would be the first project in a wonderful career, or sorry, the first project in a wonderful independent career from which the person could build. But fundamentally, part of it is, do I think that the person has a scientific career ahead of them, based within a university, functioning as a member of academic staff? that person element, and particularly when it comes to the interview, invariably we may say we're judging the project, but a lot of it is essentially how do you come over an interview. So a fellowship, I think, is a much more of a blend between the project and you. So the project and the CV. Now, so you're going to write a project, and I've already said that at least in the early stages, or if not even all of the stages, if you apply for a future leadership fellow, if you apply for a Royal Society fellowship, if you apply for a Leverhulme Trust fellowship, your fellowship will be getting read by people that know absolutely nothing about what it is that you do. When absolutely nothing is probably too strong, but no little. And I want them to be excited. One of my colleagues now, former group member, still a group member, someone called Peter Meckel. Some of you may know them. They got lucky enough, talented enough to get an award from the Leverhulme Trust. The opening sentence of his fellowship proposal was something like, making it up now, I develop endoscopes the thickness of a single human hair. Now, I can absolutely guarantee everybody that reads that first sentence on the fellowship committee goes, tell me more. Now, that's not to say every project has an opening sentence which is as intriguing as that one. But I do think that opening sentence or that opening paragraph is extremely important. That opening paragraph has to leave the assessor wanting to read more. If you haven't interested them, you're going to struggle. As an assessor, when I did the Leverhulme Trust, I would typically have 90 proposals to read through. Each of those 90, that was 90 proposals, would have, in the case of the Leverhulme Trust, would be 3 or 4 pages long. It'd be CV, You're probably looking at 6 pages per. You've got the letters of support, 7 pages, 8 pages, 9 pages, and I've got 60 of them. And I've had a really busy week, and it's Friday evening, and I was really hoping to go cycling on Saturday. So I'm going to have to try and read these bloody things because it's all due on Monday. So just think of me, or think of that assessor while they're doing that. For goodness sake, if it's 6-point font, 2mm margins with no carriage returns, my heart sinks. So you want it to be easy to read. You want section headings. You want short sentences. You want highlighted text. You want images. You want diagrams. You want it to be accessible. I've said all of that there. Now, there's always a balance with a proposal, I think. There's I am writing about superconducting detectors. Miles knows nothing about superconducting detectors. I better spell it out to him and explain what one of them is and whatever. That's fine. But at some point, your proposal is also going to be read by someone that does know something about superconducting detectors. Incidentally, I'm just picking superconducting detectors and it's an example. And you better make sure that when the expert reads the proposal, they also find something. Oh, that's a new idea. Haven't heard of anyone doing that before. Gosh, wish I'd thought of that. Oh no, this is really complicated, but clearly this person understands it. So your document that you're writing has to have some sentences, let's call them the beginning, which appeal to another physicist or a chemist. And you have to have content in your proposal, which when it is read by an expert is going to be impressed. Those are probably not the same sentences. And I'm not suggesting they're of equal weight but I always think, I read a proposal, I don't expect to understand all of it. I accept the fact that some of that proposal is written to impress and communicate to the specialist exactly how clever your idea is. And I will ask them, were you convinced by the bit I didn't understand? And then some of it has to be written for me. And I always joke a little bit about, when you have the wrap up at a selection meeting and you go, now, what did you think of that one? Someone's going to go, which one was that again? Who were they? What was their proposal about? And then you answer, oh, no, they were the person that was making the ultra thin endoscope. And you go, oh, yeah, no, I remember that now. Having that sort of, that one sentence description of what your fellowship was about is always a good thing. And so the take-home message here is you and your proposal needs to be seen as excellent by people in your field and who don't know your field. Now, given that I don't understand, and when I say I, you be realistic, many others, possibly most people on the committee, aren't up to date with all the literature in your particular subfield, any more than you are up to date with the literature in my particular subfield. I think there's some general questions that certainly pass through my mind when trying to assess and score a fellowship proposal. And I put them up on this slide here. So why is this fellowship different from you continuing to work as a PDRA in your existing research group? Is this just going to be a free pair of hands for your former supervisor, stroke manager, stroke group head? Or is this something that you are going to drive forward? What's the difference between what you are proposing to do and what you would have done had you simply just continued working with me or for me or whatever? I might be impressed by this idea. Gosh, no one before has ever thought of combining. Let's think up an area. Cell sorting with optical tweezers. Clearly they have. I'm just making up. That's a really interesting idea. Combining cell sorting with optical tweezers. People have done it, by the way, so don't. And then I'm going to go, why is this person the right person to do that? Because they're an expert in optical tweezers. That's good. Or, oh, they're an expert in cell sorting. That's good. I'll come back to what being an expert means shortly. Why are they choosing to do it in this university? Oh, because they want to combine their expertise in X with that person's expertise in Y, and that person's expertise in Y is at University Z. Why is this project going to be the start of your career? No one's done that before. If this works, my goodness, I can see all kinds of things that might mushroom out from it. And why, if it's such a good idea, why has it not been done before? Because before you didn't have access to these low-cost, high-performance graphics cards, or you didn't have access to these spatial light modulators. These are new technologies that have enabled this. Now, I'm not suggesting that you necessarily answer these questions explicitly. Maybe the form leads you to do that, but they are questions that are going to go through my head, and I'm sure the head of many others. Now, I have a bit of a problem at the moment in that I can't both see my slides in the chat box. I'm trying to work out how. I just want to make sure there's no questions. Oh, no questions. So that's fine. Right. These are maybe more questions that I'm going to ask about you. Do you have a track record of coming up with independent ideas? Where would I find evidence of that? What did you solve? Everyone in your research group had been trying to do it this way, but you realized you could do it that way. No one had been able to do that. Can you supervise and nurture careers of others? If you're going to be an academic in the future, then is this the kind of person that I'm going to want as a colleague? Have you done anything to support the broader community? Have you organized a conference? Have you run an outreach event? I don't know, something. What have you done to support people other than you? Would you be a good colleague? Just a thought. So this sort of touched on this already. I would say very, very, if any, new ideas are a bolt out of the blue. I once played a game not quite true, with a facilitator who said, come along with one of your favorite papers, not written by yourself, but written by somebody else. And I toodled up with a paper from Anton Zeilinger, if anyone's ever heard. It's a Nobel Prize winner now, wasn't Nobel Prize winner at the time. And it was on quantum entanglement with OAM states. And of course, I used to be very interested in orbital angular momentum. Doesn't matter what it is. And then he made me sit down and analyze the paper. And then you realize, of course, that this paper is actually based on, yes, there'd been these other papers written on OAM and nonlinear optics. Yes, there'd been these other papers written on measuring OAM. And yes, clearly this was actually going to be relevant to quantum entanglement. And so you join these three things together and you've got something incredibly powerful, incredibly emergent as an idea. And it's fine. That is what creativity often is. It is often bringing together known entities that aren't in themselves novel, but the combination of them is novel. However, if that is all it was, anyone could do it. And no one is any better placed to do it than anybody else. And so when I always say, when you bring together these things, one of them has to be a thing in which you are an expert. So Anton published that paper because he understood more about quantum entanglement than anybody else in the world, and then could borrow Marat Soshkin's holograms and my knowledge of second order nonlinearities in OAN and bring those things together with something that he is himself an expert in. And I alluded to that earlier when I was talking about the hypothetical case of cell sorting with optical tweezers. Why you? You're an expert in optical tweezers. So it's taking what you are an expert in and joining it with something else. That's often where novelty comes from. Different talk on creativity. And I'm going to say nowhere does this ring truer to me than interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary and post-disciplinary, pan-disciplinary, any word followed by the word disciplinary. If I want to put together a band to play music, I don't want to put together a band where every musician can play a bit of guitar, a bit of keyboard, a bit of drums, can sing a bit, and everyone can do all of these things sort of okay-ish. However talented that is, I mean, wonderfully talented, I can do none of the above. What you want is, I'm going to put together a band and I'm going to make sure I pick someone from my band that's a very good guitarist, and I pick someone that's a very good singer, and I pick someone that's a very good percussion drummer, etc., etc. And actually, a team is made up of experts where everyone is really good at what they do, but has an interest in doing something collectively that they could not do by themselves. And so, to me, when I look at an interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, pan-disciplinary project, I am looking to see that that project is made up of disciplinary experts that are all the best at what they do, with a shared goal of working together and respecting each other. Just saying. Don't be afraid to be an expert in what you do. What you choose to do with that expertise is a different issue. So you may be an expert in optical tweezers, and you may want to work with a cell biologist. Fantastic. And no doubt you will learn some cell biology in the process, and they will learn some optical tweezers in the process. But first and foremost, I want to know that you are brilliant at what you do. Sometimes I hear people ask me, oh, you know, it says here we're looking for independence. And this word independence gets bandied around a lot in fellowships, and fair enough, people interpret it in different ways. What do I mean by independence? And what do I think people mean by independence? Well, first of all, independence, I'm going to say, is more important moving forward than it is looking backwards. And this comes back to, why will your fellowship be different from you continuing as a PDRA in your existing research group? What is going to be different moving forward? And so in that sense, when I talk about independence, I mean, going forward, are you going to be the last author on your papers? Are you going to be the PI in the grant applications that you write? So independence is something I ask looking forwards, not looking back. Independence is not isolation. Independence is not, I would say this, but I believe it to be true also, a substitute for failing to deliver on the project in which you were employed to be a PDRA. Independence of intellect is often evidenced by clarity of unique contributions to past projects. Now, the need to evidence independence applies more to fellowship idea than the past publication record. So I'm not looking through the publication record to go, oh, does this person have any papers in which no one else is authored? Does this person have some papers in which, you know, maybe I'm interested if they have the odd paper where they were the senior author. Maybe I'm interested if they've had an odd, you know, papers where they publish with different groups of people. That's fine. But the notion of independence applies more to the fellowship idea. Is this your idea, or have you just repurposed an idea from your research group? What's the novelty that you're bringing beyond the research group? It's a forward-looking question. And as I said, author lists are complicated, subject to subfields and national norms. Author contribution statements, I think, are quite useful, and I would actually encourage people generally to adopt author contribution statements. And indeed, the narrative part of a narrative CV, when you talk about, you might talk about 2 or 3 of your papers in that, in which case do talk about what it is you did, what it is, why you made the difference. So people can bring out the significant role that they played. There is cake and there is icing. I love icing on cakes, by the way, but sadly, cake and icing and no cake is a bit grim. A rounded CV is more than just the papers you publish or even the impact research creates. However, given that I'm sitting there with 250 applications in front of me, of which in that first instance, I can only take 1/3 of them through to referee, I've got to find a reason to reject 2/3 of the applications in front of me. Ultimately, if I look back, as I was doing the other day, on people that we funded in my time chairing the Royal Society thing, not one of those people did not have an impressive publication record. So I'm not suggesting that a publication record alone can win you a fellowship. But if you have a weak publication record, you're going to struggle to win a fellowship. Now, I may wish the world was different. You can argue that I'm wrong and that it should be different, and I might even agree with you. But I just make the observation that people that win independent research fellowships, 99 times out of 100, have strong publication records. Similarly, a strong publication record alone will not win you a fellowship. You need a great idea of what you're going to do next. You need to demonstrate to me that you can support the work of others. You need other things too. But there's a cake on which to put the icing. And the cake is all those traditional things that we keep on telling ourselves we've moved on from. A narrative CV. I've spoken about a narrative CV before. I'm not going to do so again, other than to say a narrative CV is not a CV without evidence. And, you know, old style CVs were lists of lists where people would list the prizes they won, none of which you'd ever heard of, or the conferences they'd been to, none of which you'd ever heard of, or the papers they published, none of which you'd ever read. And that was fine. And the great thing about the narrative CV is it gives you the opportunity to say more about less. So, you know, the example I give is and I won a travel award from the Institute of X. Fine. I'm more interested in the bits of the sentence that followed. This travel award allowed me to go to conference Y, where I met person Z. And working together with person Z, we were able to publish this paper that's just come out. That is how you use a narrative CV, to add context and outcome to those list of lists. Now, if I said that about everything on my list, then I would run to about 50 pages, and clearly they're not 50 pages long. So in a narrative CV, you say more about less. I think we'll skip over this.
Sorry, Miles. Miles, sorry, there is a question in the chat.
Excellent. Let me just click on the right window.
Yep.
Hi, Miles. I appreciate that this is probably hard to quantify. Thank you, Aurora. Oh, can you, in citation, number of papers, impact factor? No, not really, because I think it would be very field specific. Clearly, if I was a particle physicist, then the answer would be very different to if I was an optician. If I say something now, it will be taken as gospel, or it will be taken as over specific. So let me not do that. I would expect if I saw if there were fewer, I mean, this is terrible, but I'm just going to, you know, if there were fewer than 5 papers, you better hope those papers are going to be bloody good ones. I would expect to see some of those papers with you as first author or joint first author, or contribution statements. I mean, again, if the paper had 30 authors on it or something, maybe it's a, you know, it's a bigger team. I'm thinking about papers which have like 4, 5, 6 authors on them. I would expect to see some of those papers at first author. I would expect to see those papers as probably the underpinning science to why you are the right person to do this fellowship idea. It's the ideas in those papers that you're going to combine with these other ideas to build upon and go somewhere different. Of course, I'm not allowed to talk about impact factor, so I won't talk about impact factor. And I do genuinely think it matters much less than it used to do. if it was in my field, I'd hope to recognize some of the journals that you're publishing in. That doesn't mean that everyone needs 5 papers in Nature to qualify for a fellowship. Although, incidentally, if you did have 5 papers in Nature, I suspect people would probably read your application with interest. But no one has 5 papers in Nature, so that's fine. What I would say is you probably have a good point of reference, because you can look amongst your research group or your friends or your colleagues or friends of friends or colleagues of colleagues and go, well, what did that CV look like when they won their fellowship? And go, just make the assumption that that was a good publication record, and that looked the same. And I think that probably a pretty good tip for any grant you apply for. I don't think I've ever applied for any grant successfully which I've not seen an example of someone that's done it previously. And that, again, part of the hidden curriculum. Reading someone else's successful application, not to pinch their ideas, clearly, because you wouldn't get it funded the same idea twice, but just to gauge the level of technical detail versus lay summary. How did they use diagrams? What did their CV look like? What did their publication record look like? Do I look a bit like them? Not a bad thing to do. So I've sort of dodged the bullet a bit there. Incidentally, if you did happen to have a paper which had been highly cited in the world's top 1%, you can get all that information from Web of Science or Scopus. I probably would write about it in my narrative CV. And I published this piece of, let's go back to I won the travel brand. I went to this conference, I met this person, we wrote this paper together. It is now incredibly highly cited as evidenced by Clarivate, blah, 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 blah. That would, I would say that's a strong narrative. So I'm not saying that you must have that, but if you did have some highly cited papers, or you go thanks to this paper, I was invited to go and speak at this conference. Okay, that's another way of recognizing that. I was selected to present this work at the Institute of Physics to the visiting delegation from North America or whatever. I mean, it's this idea of, it's not just me that thinks this is good, but somebody else, this community over there thinks this is good. And the evidence for that is that third-party recognition. And one form of third-party recognition is a high citation rate. There's been times in my career when I've had a high citation rate, and there's been times in my career when I was writing stuff that no one read. I didn't, funny enough, when I was writing stuff that no one read, I didn't talk about my high citation rate in my CV. I picked other things to talk about. There we go. But good luck. It's a great question, Charlie. Oh, that's very kind of you. I'll read that bit out. Thanks, Miles. Honestly, I think that was an excellent answer. Yeah, I do too. But thank you for your kind words. Let me go back to the thing. Narrative CV. Look at that. So I've just got 2 more slides left. You'll be glad to know. I will just tell you a little story now. When I was much younger, not that much younger, 13 years younger, so I was 50-ish, maybe 49, and I arranged for an editor from Science magazine to come and talk to our early career researchers on how to write papers. And I went myself, to show willing. And oh my God, it was a revelation like I'd never experienced. And at first I thought, well, I do all of these things already. And then I went back and looked at my papers that I'd written at that point. And thought, actually, I don't. Funny enough. So this advice he gave us all at the time, again, old advice, but it's still relevant. So this is what I look at when I'm reading something. What's the state of the art? Now, this is not because I want to know what the state of the art is. It's because I want to assure myself that you know what the state of the art is. Do you know what the state of the art is? If you're going to tell me you've got a great idea for drilling small holes, I want to be assured that you know what the state of the art is for the smallest hole yet drilled and how it was done. Otherwise, I've got no confidence in your new idea being better than the old one. So what's the state of the art? Traditional endoscopes have bundles of optical fibers. Each pixel in the image has its own independent fiber. What have you done or proposing that's going to be different from that? Our new endoscope will be different because rather than having thousands and thousands of optical fibers, we're only going to have one. And we're going to get a whole image through a single fiber. So it's going to be different. Why would anyone care? Well, because now I'm going to be able to look through smaller holes than anyone could look before. And this is going to be useful for XYZ. Now, that little trilogy of what's the state of the art, what have you done, what are you proposing that's going to be different? Difference is key. If it's not different, it's not research. It's going to be different. If that works, clearly research has risk. If it works, why on earth would anyone care other than the authors of the paper? What's the broader impact of what you're proposing? If it worked, why would anyone care? Now, incidentally, I think those 3 bullet points apply to the abstract, they apply to the letter to the editor, and incidentally, they apply to your research fellowship application. What are you going to do different? If it works, why would anyone care? And I don't mean general interest or care. Of course I care, but I mean really care. What difference is it going to make to them? Now, you've listened to me. Fine. Maybe you've listened to me. Listen to other people. Other people might have a different view, and you should take that on board. But ultimately, you're all grown-ups. Don't do what I say. Do what you think you believe in and what you think is right. Just listen first, and then, not out of stubbornness, decide to do what you're always going to do. Listen, reflect, and then take a grown-up decision on how to move forward. Finally, it's a very small world. I predict that most of you in this virtual room, your next job will be from someone you've already met or will meet soon at a conference. I predict that most of you, your next funded grant will be refereed by someone you've already met or will meet or did meet when they looked around the lab last week or will look around the lab in 4 weeks' time when they come to be the seminar speaker. And I predict that that applies to papers too. That many, many, many of our papers are read by people that you have met, who have listened to you present your work. And actually, I'd say one reason to go to conferences and present your work is so that when it turns up in someone's inbox as a paper, they go, oh, yes, I heard about that at Clio. And it was very interesting. And that is a great place to be. So you sometimes wonder why you meet people, why you go to these events and why you network. It all comes home to roost. And on that happy note, I have finished. I said I wasn't going to speak for more than 45 minutes. Well, nearly turned out. Now, we've got some polls just to get people warmed up for the Q&A. First question. What percentage of fellowship holders do you think go on to progress their academic careers? So we've got a poll to answer there. One response. Wow. So I know, incidentally, the answer to this, which is why I've asked it. Oh, excellent. I can see lots of numbers coming up here. Oh, I love this. This is really clever. Barrett, I have to say thank you. I forgot we had these polls. Can't believe that.
That's all right.
Thanks for setting it up. We'll come back. So we see lots of numbers here. Now, I wanted to just remind us that many other careers exist outside of university, and those are wonderful and they are brilliant. And I would not ever want to do anything to encourage people not to go down that road. This is not the be all and end all of human existence. But I'm conscious of the fact that many PDRAs do actually, at least they're half thinking, and the fact you're here at all makes me think that you're half thinking of doing this. And my advice to everybody in a physics department or an engineering department or a chemistry department or a maths department would be, if you decide that you want a career as an academic, applying for and winning a research fellowship is never the wrong thing to do. And I know, for example, in the case of the Royal Society, something like 90% of all the people that win one of our research fellowships secure a permanent, what's permanent mean in this day and age, but you know what I mean. Tenured, what does that mean? Doesn't mean anything. Secure an open-ended academic contract with their university or a different university. And percentages for some of the other fellowship schemes are not as high as that, but they are higher than the national batting average, so to speak. So if you want a career as an academic, I think applying for a research fellowship is never a strong word, very rarely the wrong thing to do. And there's two reasons for that. One is it gives you a platform on which to demonstrate independence. The second is it demonstrates that you can win a competition. And sadly, people, when deciding who are they going to award their prize to, the hardest medal you'll ever win is your first one. Once you've won one medal, they come like a little stream. And the same thing's true of research fellowships. So 10%.
Can you speak a little bit to the, just to sort of continue this discussion, a little bit to the contrary. Is it still possible? I mean, obviously you don't have the lived experience necessarily of going into industry, but is it the completely wrong thing to do to win a research fellowship if you think at one point I might be wanting to leave academia?
No. Incidentally, I wasn't always an academic. I did work in industry for a while, only for 3 years. I can't claim that I was. But when I finished my PhD, I didn't become a postdoc. I went to work in industry and then came back into academia later. Back in the days when it was possible to do that, I think it's probably harder now. So Lucy, I think, you know, we are very critical, rightly, of the UK in many aspects, and there's so much which is wrong with our academic system. Whatever. Well, not whatever, it's wrong. One of the few things I actually think we get right is our support for people at this career stage. And actually the plethora of fellowship schemes that we run in the UK, whether it be the Royal Academy of Engineering, whether it be the Royal Society, whether it be the Leverhulme Trust, whether it be Wellcome, depending on your, you know, whether it be EPSRC and the Future Leader Fellowship Programme, we run a good, healthy group of fellowships. And having won one of these fellowships, we give people the chance to do their own thing. It's not like being, I don't want to name other countries, but I can think of other, you know, dare I say, even Germany. The Max Planck organizations are wonderful. They are absolutely brilliant. But often you find yourself just working for one of the directors. Now, there are some enlightened Max Planck institutes where they give their junior research group leaders an incredible amount of freedom too. So I don't want to tar everybody with the same brush. But I would say the one thing the UK does very well is give people that opportunity to pursue ideas independently of their former thesis mentor. And that ability to demonstrate that you took something and made something out of nothing, I would say is a transferable attribute. So even if you then decide, you know, I've this university thing is just awful, I don't really want to, I'm going to go and work for company X. The fact that you demonstrated you were the top 5% of your generation through winning one of these fellowships, the fact that you then took one of these fellowships and generated and created something out of nothing, you built up a group, you equipped a lab, you did whatever. I think these are attributes which have transferable currency associated with them. So I don't think it's a mistake to apply for a fellowship. Clearly, if you spend 4 days a week writing fellowship applications, you're not going to get a lot done to write them about, if you know what I mean. So there's a balance in terms of how much time you should spend writing a fellowship application. Again, I'm a survivor bias. I'm an example of survivor bias. Let's assume I survived. But I think I applied for 3 fellowships before I got one. Just again talking about rejections and things. At what point do you go, do you know what, this is not going to work out for me? I need a plan B. I remember Ackle talking about having a plan B. Sorry, one of our colleagues. In terms of, so I, you know, go down the research fellowship route. I've never met anyone that's so brilliant that they're guaranteed to get one. So I don't, you know, you have to have a plan B. If winning a fellowship is your plan A, you still need a plan B. I was going to go back into the company that I'd left to come into university if I hadn't won one. That was my plan. Maybe that would have been a better plan. I'd be rich now, or not. Maybe, who knows. There we go. About previous working industry for someone transitioning to academia, is that something that would be positive impact on your proposal? Well, it could be. Depends what you wanted to do. It depends what your proposal is about. I think as I mentioned already, I spent 3 years in industry before I came back into academia. It gave me a wonderful opportunity to pivot and change direction. I came back and it just changed completely. My fellowship proposal had nothing to do with what I'd done my PhD in. I did my PhD in high resolution laser spectroscopy for frequency standards in the 10.6 spectral region. My fellowship proposal was I'm going to take orbital angular momentum, put it into an optical tweezer and make an optical spanner. You know, I rotate little microscopic objects at great speed. It had nothing to do with mine. But that break in industry gave me the opportunity to come back with a fresh set of skills. Hi, Miles. Thank you for the talk. Oh, no problem. Do you have some advice on how to adapt after rejection? Just for instance, you write an application that you believe explains your suitability to the best of your abilities. The reviewer gives you 3 out of 6. What do you do next? Take out a contract on the reviewer? No, I'm just kidding. It's grim. And I get really upset when people reject my grant applications, and I take it all to heart. Incidentally, one of my friends, Bob Boyd, Canadian American physicist, his son-in-law is an actor. And he's been in Star Trek. My God, he's been on Broadway. He's a hugely successful actor. And so I asked him what he did day to day. I said, do you like learn scripts and things? What do you do every day? And he said, every day I go to auditions. I was like, oh, really? I thought people would just come and... I said, how many auditions do you go to a year? He said, 200. It's like, my God. And how many of those do you get? And he said, if I'm really lucky, I get 1. I thought, my God, I thought we had it tough. And I said, what, do you get like letters going, I'm sorry? He said, no, most of the time you just don't hear. You just don't hear. and that's like a rejection. He said, you stand up on stage and the director goes, I was looking for someone younger, or I was looking for someone more handsome, or you're too tall. And you're just thinking, this is barbaric. Now, I'm not saying our situation not barbaric, but I'm just saying we're not the only profession which is barbaric. Not that that makes it better, but, 3 out of 6 is not great, but hey, at least it's not been told you need to be taller. The score often hides something, I would say, which is they didn't like your proposal. And hopefully there's some words. And I think the words are more useful than the score. I don't know how to, if you work out how to cope with rejection, by the way, please come and give a seminar and I'll come and listen, because I take it all to heart, very much so. And then go and spend the evening with my family or friends or whatever and decide there's more important things in life. So it's tough. What do you do next? Nothing for a few days, and then have a think about what you want to do. If you've got 6 out of 6, 6 out of 6, 6 out of 6, 3 out of 6, that you can solve this problem. If you've got 3 out of 6, 3 out of 6, 3 out of 6, 3 out of 6, you might need to go back to the drawing board. So I wouldn't let one score change my direction for either way. I think you want to look at the basket. Not really a very good answer, but did my best. Hi, Miles. Useful advice. Good. I was wondering, would it be beneficial for a fellowship application to leave your home institution for a 1 to 2 year postdoc and then return to apply for a fellowship, or could that actually make things more difficult? Good question. In the olden days, I would have said, or I would have been told when I was young, you need to go elsewhere. You just need to it was just a given that you are not going to do your PhD in institution X, followed by a postdoc in institution X, followed by a research fellowship in institution X, followed by an academic member of staff in institution X. Just wasn't going to happen. And people would want to see that you had succeeded in multiple environments. And that still works. That idea that, well, I made a success of my PhD, I then moved and worked with different people, and I made a success of that, and then I moved and worked with different people, and I made a success of that. Sooner or later, people get the, oh my God, there's a common thread here. It's the person that we're talking about. I would say people are more open-minded now about people recognize that people might have caring responsibilities, that people, you might just go, well, the reason I'm working in institution X is because this has got the high power laser that is worth £27 million and it's central to my research. Clearly, I'm not going to go anywhere else. So all I would say is if you stay in the same institution, be clear why you are doing that. Now, that might be reasons you can't share or don't want to share. I'd probably write to the funder just to remind them of that. I think if you do stay in the same institution, then probably someone on the interview committee, appointment committee, selection committee is going to go, yeah, but how do we know that they are intellectually independent of their group head? Or is this just going to be more of the same stuff? And I think that then you go, well, okay, that question's going to come up. How might I go about tackling that? Maybe I should sit down with my group head now and have a talk about what would be my thing, and maybe you publish a couple of papers without their name on it. I mean, because you're doing something differently. Maybe you take responsibility for a clear part of the program. I'm just saying that the It's very difficult to fix retrospectively. I think you have to think ahead and go, in 3 years' time, I am going to apply for a research fellowship. I am going to want to stay here. I have been here all along. What would I do? How could I demonstrate? What would be an appropriate way of demonstrating that I have intellectual independence? So I don't think there's a problem moving. Coming back to the question that's asked in front of me, I don't think there's a problem staying, but just think about it and think about how you're going to demonstrate that independence, which is not I hid in a hole for 3 years and didn't talk to anybody, therefore I am independent. That would be a bad strategy that no one's going to welcome, least of all the people around the hole that were hoping to talk to you. Showing that you can succeed in different environments is a transferable skill. Not everybody has the freedom to do that, or the privilege to do that, or is it appropriate? And I'm certainly aware of that. I think most people on most interview committees are aware of it, but they would look for reassurance.
That's great. Thank you very much, Miles. There is another question in the question and answer section, and is from Christophoros. Thank you for a nice seminar again. How much weight, if any, should one put on listing the risk of the proposed project?
Hit me with it again. How much weight is it on putting? So I just didn't catch.
How much weight, if any, should one put on listing the risk of the proposed project?
The risk.
Yeah.
Interesting question. I would say within a fellowship proposal, I think you've got multiple threads. And I think you want a portfolio of risk. Now, what does that mean? That means that you might have a contingency plan. What you don't want, okay, there's two bad things. One is, yes, there's no risk at all. This is all just going to be perfect. It's going to be fine. I'm going to publish a paper on day 17 on this topic, and on day 20, I'm being ridiculous now. It's all mapped out. It's all brilliant. And you go, well, look, if it's that freaking obvious, why has no one else done this before? What? This is not research. This is turning the handle. Similarly, you don't want a project that goes, yes, well, day 1, we're going to make the anti-gravity machine, and then days 3, 4, and 5, we're going to use it to do different things. And you go, well, hang on. What happens if the anti-gravity machine doesn't work on day 1? Doesn't that bugger the rest of the project? And of course it does. So clearly in extremis, no risk is bad. High risk, ridiculous risk is bad. So you either have a contingency, which says, well, if this doesn't work, I'm going to go tackle it that way. Or you sort of go, well, I've got my different work packages, and this one is going to be carrying on with the same, and in parallel with that, I'm going to try to build a better instrument. And if that works, we'll do this. And if not, I'm going to do that. So I'm not being very clear here. You need some risk, but the risk can't derail the project. So if it's risky, you need multiple avenues, or you need a contingency plan. And we can now talk about Gantt charts and project charts, and some people look at them, some people don't. But conceptually, I think of that interviews at the Royal Society. People go, well, what happens if that first bit doesn't work? You've got to have an answer to that. So it's a different group at the same institution, different enough. Good answer. That is a nice way you can not change institution, yet demonstrate you multiple success. I remember Martin Lavery, actually, one of my former group members, applied for a research fellowship at Royal Academy of Engineering, and was going to take it in engineering. Took it in the engineering department, not with me. Maybe because he just wanted to get away from me. But it was also a way of demonstrating that future independence. I will not be, not only will I not be working for Miles directly, but I won't even be in the same building. So that was a very clear way of marking independence. So that's another question there. So the risk, I haven't really answered the risk question very well. Well, hopefully I've answered it a bit. Can be. I'm looking to see if there's any more questions or Q&A. Let me have a look in the Q&A.
Oh,
can't see it.
Anna came over now. No, it's just the thank you. Okay. So is there anyone else with questions? Please feel free to add it to the chat. While in the meantime, I do ask you a question, if I can. So what is, as the point of view of the reviewer, what is the worst mistake that an applicant can do that makes you look at the application and say, oh no, this is a no?
I get pretty pissed off if there's lots of spelling mistakes. I know that sounds ridiculous. Because you go, well, if you've taken so little care of this proposal, then what do I think you're going to take any more care of your research? And I can't spell either. But on the other hand, I can use a spell checker. And I do have, believe it or not, friends who might read it for me or whatever. And I don't want it to look rushed. I mean, in this modern day and age, if I think it's been written by AI, I'm really fucked off. So don't do that. On the other hand, when I've written stuff and I go, dear AI, do you think I've met the criteria? That's not a bad question to ask. You're like, no, you haven't talked about how you're going to do your route to exploitation. And you look at it and went, yeah, no, I didn't. You're right. Oh, shit. I better write something about that. So I'm not saying AI isn't a useful referee or a reviewer in terms of, and some people are better at using it than I am. I'm not particularly good, but you upload the call and you upload the document and you go, do you think I met call requirements? And I've had some pretty good tips from, like I was doing something the other day and it was like, came back to me, no, you've got all the ideas covered, but you haven't really used the right vocabulary here, and you should really try and edit your documents such that you're using the UKRI vocabulary. I'm like, UKRI have a vocabulary? What kind of, so I'm there, what kind of words did you have in mind? And it comes back about, ecosystem and whatever. You think, oh, okay, right, fine, I get it now. So you talk about mistakes. I get pissed off a little. I mean, this is just my personal preference now. There's a difference between being optimistic and excited about your work and your career rather than being boastful.
I see.
And maybe I'm just a bit old school. I sort of expect people to write in a scholarly way, which is not, I am brilliant, but I am really excited about these ideas. I expect you to be enthusiastic. I expect you to think your ideas are good ideas. That's not quite the same. I expect you to look on the bright side. I expect you to talk about what happens if this works. So I do not want false modesty of, well, people have tried it again before and I'll give it another go. I expect a much more upbeat, optimistic, forward-looking, enthusiastic. But I want to feel your excitement, not your arrogance. Sorry, not your arrogance, Aurora. You're not arrogant at all. But
I hope so. Okay.
But you know what I mean. And
yeah,
so I think you can have the wrong tone. And you're going to say, where in the application document, Miles, does it say write with the correct tone? Okay, no, it doesn't say that. But that if you say I invented such and such, and someone on the committee goes, no, they didn't. That was invented by that person over there. You're dead. I'm not dead, but I mean that overstatement of, and that's a difficult one, because if you have invented it, I want you to tell me you invented it. If you know what I mean. So it's a delicate balance between don't hide your light under a bushel. If you're the most highly cited quantum scientist working in the UTK today, tell me that's the case. But then don't have someone else tell me, no, they're not. This person over here, so I'm not going to say don't lie, because that's too silly thing to say. So, be proud of what you've done. Be excited about what you're proposing to do. And I would say that's the right frame of mind to get yourself into. So you're asking me about like the sort of the red flags. Making claims which are just untrue is not a good start, and you do see it, but you don't see those proposals again because they get rejected.
Okay, so that's great. Thank you very much. I see that there are no other questions. No, maybe I spoke too early. Oh, here we go. We have another one in the question and answer section. If an applicant has been rejected in a previous fellowship round, does that influence the assessment of a future application, or is each application evaluated completely independently?
Well, there's what should happen and what does happen. Not necessarily the same thing. Most fellowship proposals, schemes will go, everything's afresh. On the other hand, the institution has memory, and it's very difficult to erase the memory. So if you came to interview and crashed and burned, then if I take the URF scheme, if you got an interview, then you were unlucky not to get a fellowship, because basically everybody we interview, I would say at the end of the day, when we're going, well, if we had an infinite amount of money, would we have funded these people? The answer comes back yes. So we interviewed 26 people, and quite frankly, we'd have loved to have given 26 people fellowships, and we only gave 13. So if you ever get interviewed for a URF, you're thereabouts, just apply again. You would be foolish, however, not to take the opportunity to improve your application. So if you just did a copy and paste, that would not be a great thing to do. But you don't need to start again. This is not go back to the drawing board and come up with a different idea. Clearly, your idea was really good. It got past the sift from 240 to 80. It went out to expert referee. It got invited for interview. And on a different day with a different panel, maybe you would have got it. I'm not going to claim that it's that. But you'd be foolish not to, and now I've got this thing, or I've de-risked that little bit of the project, but I've had this new idea. It isn't just that I started it and I've begun it. You've got to have something. You'd be foolish not to put something to expand the story in some way. So, if you get rejected, you don't always get, if you got rejected and the feedback you got was exceptionally powerful, like you got an interview, then I would go, you're on the right track, have another go. And I can think of people, believe it or not, who so like when I was chair of the URF scheme, you only do it for 3 years. It's not that I was sacked, I hasten to add. But I can think of people that came back a second year and got it a second year. I'm trying to think if I can think of anyone that came back 2 years running and didn't get it. That would be a bit gutting. I don't think we had any of those. So clearly, there's an existence proof of people we interviewed 2 years running who got it second time around. And they didn't come back with something radically different. It wasn't. I was going to do optical tweezers, and now I'm going to do diffraction limited microscopy. I mean, it was building on the ideas they had. I think realistically, I referee for other fellowship schemes. You see the same proposal coming in to multiple schemes in sort of parallel, slightly reworked, slightly readjusted, obviously. I think that's fine. But I don't think, if you've gone, yes, I've applied 10 times with this fellowship application and it's never succeeded, maybe I'll apply an 11th time. That's not, probably there was a reason why it didn't succeed the first time.
Okay.
How much space would one put on listing? Oh, we've had that one, haven't we? Oh, yeah. The Q&A goes the other way. How exciting! The Q&A goes upwards and the chat goes downwards. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I think we cleared the board.
Fantastic. Now, I made an offer earlier that if anyone wanted to write to me, I will do my best to answer.
Thank you very much for your availability and for the talk. Hope everyone had a good time and a bit of reassurance on the fellowship process. And please feel free to let us know if you have any other questions, or as Miles said, please write to him directly. And Miles, thank you again. That was absolutely excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, everybody.